welcome to Woodbine Live, the EP Taylor Stakes edition. Thanks joining us wherever you are today, whether it's on America's Best Racing or through the Woodbine social media. My name is JD Fox. From her Eiffel 65 like blue broadcast location, Don Lupul, former track analyst at Woodbine, and somewhere in the South that we will remain nameless, Chase Sessoms joining us as well today. And we've got two races we're covering today, and I'm going to go ahead and bring up on the screen already. We're 4 minutes to post for the Durham Cup, a grade 3 affair, 3-year-olds and up, going 1 1/16 on the Tapeta. And an interesting field signed on here. A big scratch in this race has been a horse that was a little disappointing so far this year, Riptide Rock, for Steve Attard, and with Justin Stein aboard was a steward scratch today. So we've got a field of 8 here, and with 3 minutes to post, I'll start with you, Chase. Who do you like in this spot from a gambling perspective?
You know, I really kind of keyed in on special forces. I'm, as stated before, a sucker for Candy Ride Baby stepping on synthetic surfaces. And looking back at the past performances, it looked like the horse had a great win in the Durham Cup last year, and then really kind of fell off form, but is starting to ratchet forward a little bit. Should be pretty forwardly placed. I think either on the lead or near it is probably going to do fairly well today. So yeah, I was going to use special forces, and then 2. Along with the 5 and the 8 to every horse but Moira in the next one.
Ooh, that's what we call in the broadcast business a tease, Chase. Don,
yes,
when we're looking at this Durham Cup field, where are you looking at from a wagering perspective?
Yeah, I'm definitely looking for odds in here. I'm not super excited about anything that's going to be low. I think the Cassie horse is completely intriguing. The one that's never run on synthetic before, the 9 horse Who's the Star, has a couple of wins. He really woke up on the turf, which kind of indicates to me that he should enjoy the synthetic surface. He's a well-traveled individual. He likes to win. He's had a pretty successful season so far. The last race was completely diseased, but I don't care. That was at Kentucky Downs, and there's some horses that just could not lift a hoof on that surface, and he was in a little tough too. So I throw that race out. All it does is inflate the odds. I like the price I'm getting. I'm going outside to the 9.
I think one thing that we will talk about, obviously, the feature race, the EP Taylor, today on turf. We'll talk about the weather conditions in Toronto, as it is gotten up in Fahrenheit. It's 51 degrees currently, but it was very cold overnight. So a lot of frost on the turf course, and colder weather has interesting impacts on the Tapeta. Obviously, an all-weather surface known for its ability to absorb moisture, but it does react differently depending on the temperature. That Woodbine turf course tends to favor speed when it's cold, right, Don?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, the synthetic, it definitely tightens up. I wouldn't worry, honestly, too much about the frost on the turf at this time of year, because it's just not staying cold or getting cold enough to really affect anything. It's not like we're dealing with the frost in the ground. It's just on the grass. So it's just the humidity and whatever. So I don't think that that's going to be any kind of a concern. But definitely the Tapeta does tend to really it's the varying levels of humidity. It will change a lot. And I do think speed can be favored on days like that.
And speaking of speed, the 3 War Bomber won the Seagram Cup in similar fashion back in August at 18-1, taking the field wire to wire with Savine Savachi aboard for Norm McKnight. 7-1 here. That's where I'm going to land. So we've got some opinions, and we will touch on yours. Feel free to comment, and we'll talk obviously about the EP Taylor Stakes when it comes to it. But for now, we are going to, as soon as I have this set up here, we're going to head over to Robert Geller for the rest of the load and the call of the Grade 3 Durham Stakes. Good luck and enjoy.
Moves in, and the field is now all in. Locked up.
accidentally taking Dawn on the stream. I should have taken it right as the horse crossed the wire there, because we got some finger guns from Dawn there.
That's it. Bye. Me and the blue room are leaving. A 9-1 shot. My work here is done. I can't possibly top that. So have a good rest of the show.
I think I'm figuring out how to handicap Woodbine, which is completely disregard what I think and just listen to Dawn. Because all of my success has been Dawn Lupul advised.
Yeah, he looked good too. We didn't get to really look at a whole lot of them, but I thought he was kind of presenting himself nice, and so I did take a quick second look at him. Sometimes I don't know if you guys are the same, but I find my best handicapping decisions come sort of really off the cuff and spur of the moment, as opposed to sitting there and studying for hours. I don't know.
Yeah, and then sometimes it's easy as for some people out there as connections. You got Cassie and Emma Jane Wilson for 9-1 in a big stake.
Yeah,
I have to make myself really like slow down whenever I'm looking at, like, I take hours to handicap a card. Otherwise, I'll just get, very much ADHD, see a squirrel kind of handicapping when I go fast, where it's just I see an angle I like and chase it.
And that doesn't work, obviously. You don't think that's a good method. It's not paying dividends.
I mean, you just saw me do it with the candy ride baby that I think might still be running. So, yeah.
That was a good finish. I thought the 5-horse ran really, really well. Artie Storm, he hung tough there. And, Emma, if you watched Who's the Star, he was sitting last, and he wasn't even a close last. He was like a couple lengths off the horse that was second last. So he was pretty far back. I was a little concerned early on, but, they kind of got more interested around the turn and then had the stretch. Emma really, that's the thing about Emma Wilson, is she is such a good finisher on a horse. Like, she will get every last ounce that the horse has to give. And I think she kind of won this race. I'm not sure Who's the Star would have won with somebody who wasn't as aggressive as Emma can be.
I think Who's the Star might owe was it the one either like a sugar cube or some carrots or something, because it really just kind of set up that pace really well for a horse to come off it.
Yeah, you talked about that right before we went on the air, Chase, that you thought like the king was going to be had basically one place to go, which was forward in this spot, and that's exactly what we saw. And obviously that compromised the trip on the 3 for War Bomber, but I thought Sahin settled the horse down, and that was quite an effort to finish in third and kind of hold on for third there for War Bomber. So we got 2 of the 3 for the trifecta here, which with 9-1 over 9-2 over 7-1 should pay some healthy dividends here in the Grade 3 Durham Cup. But yeah, impressive performance from Who's the Star, who tried synthetic for the first time today and won. That's a segue, kids, as obviously we've got a big star in the making in Moira coming up in the EP Taylor. And this is the EP Taylor run on the EP Taylor turf course. And this is going to be the first time the Ontario bred filly will be trying the turf when we hit the EP Taylor turf course in about 27 minutes. I want to take a look at Moira's lone turf work and get kind of your guys' thoughts here as we wait for the parimutuel dividend. So we'll play this and we'll talk over it here. And when we're looking at this, obviously this is towards the end of the work here, just running alone. The earlier work on synthetic was running in company, but this just looked like a work to me, just getting used to the ground.
I mean, she's got a beautiful action.
Yeah. She's going like kind of like a spider. I mean, there's nothing there that suggests. I mean, her pedigree, she's a go sapper. There's enough turfiness in her dam side too. So it's a lot to ask though. I mean, that's her lone grass experience, other than probably eating it. And she's facing some pretty rugged mares today. She's facing older mares today. There is a lot against Moira, and I think Chase already tipped his hand what he thinks her chances are in here.
Well, the deal is, I think that she might be a super horse, but I feel like this might be my best opportunity to beat a super horse before she just, turns into an absolute synthetic star, working the synthetic circuit. And I just think that if I'm going to beat her, this is the spot, but I'm fully prepared to just sit back and enjoy the show and be wrong too.
What do you think, JD? You haven't given us, yeah.
Well, I think one of the key things here that I want to talk about more is the history of this race, and that The history of this race has not been one where local horses necessarily succeed at a high rate. It's usually the European shippers and the European invaders, or the invaders from Europe that maybe have been running down on the Naira circuit or at Keeneland or some other places, and then come up for this race. So the local horses, I mean, we've only had really 3 Woodbine-based horses win this race in the last 20 years. So I think that is going against it as well, because there are some very, very talented horses coming in from overseas. I think the German import Milady is very interesting in that they've tried her at longer distances, but I think, you know, this 1.25 miles might be the right fit. I think 1.5 miles was too long. Back 2 starts back in the Deutsche Derby. But you look at the second place effort in the 1,000 guineas. Obviously, that was a mile race, but the horse was making a big move towards the end of that race. So I think the European invaders have a chance here. It's tough. We were there, Dawn, for the Queen's Plate, and it's tough to really doubt Moira. I just want to put this all back in our heads real quick. Let's look back at the Queen's Plate and how dominant Moira was, and then we'll discuss her chances more here.
As they come down to the final quarter in the Queen's Plate, the Minxter, Ironstone, and here comes the filly, Moira, and she's exploding down the outside, and in the blink of an eye has raced to the front, and it's Moira out in the lead 2 lengths, racing home his Hall of Dreams down the outside. But the mighty filly has devastated them, and the 163rd Queen's Plate is a big win for Moira. She is stunning, wins 6 lengths.
I mean, that's an impressive performance. And for those watching that may not be familiar, obviously the Queen's Plate, the first leg of the Canadian Triple Crown, that is for Canadian bred horses. So you look at Moira coming in, she's ran 5 times. She's got 4 wins in a second. And that second place effort was the only effort against Open Company. So that's where, again, I think Moira is a super horse. And I think this is obviously the top Ontario bred 3-year-old we see in either division, the male or the female division. But I think she's vulnerable in this spot because it is a gigantic step up in class.
It's huge. I want to proffer a couple of things to you guys and get your opinion on it. So Moira ran in the Queen's Plate. Everyone was waiting to see, is she going to try to go for the Triple Crown, which meant she would have had to, the Triple Crown of Canadian racing, to go to Fort Erie and run on the dirt. And that was basically shut down almost immediately by her connections. It was like, it wasn't even on the table. And at the time they said they really wanted to get grade 1 status for her, and they were exploring options in the States, and Parks came up. The cotillion was something they were discussing, and then she wasn't even, it didn't even seem like she was ultimately pointed to that. The Breeders' Stakes came and went, which is on grass at Woodbine. They didn't point to that. So they're going for the grade 1. They're going for it today. But I wonder, I'm curious myself, we've seen her antics. I'm wondering if they're concerned about shipping her, quite honestly, that they didn't even want to ship her to Fort Erie. They didn't go to Parks. They haven't gone anywhere. They want the grade 1, but they're staying home. I'm just wondering, because she is, well, we've seen it in action. She's a bit of a nutball.
I also wonder if I've always had the personal theory that synthetic horses always tend to translate better to turf. And maybe that this was just the better spot, that as a synthetic horse, she's going to make the transition over a little bit easier. It's just hard to get behind that at 1-9 though.
Oh, impossible. And they wouldn't have gone in the Breeders because it's 1.5 miles. So that would be a little bit too far for her. So I guess this makes sense on a lot of levels, but yeah, at 1-9, it makes no sense to me. I would never play a horse. She's not going to go off at 1-9, but even like anything odds on, I think she's overbet.
She floated up to 3-5, definitely opened up at 1-9.
So we look at the race 8 mutual payouts for the Durham Cup. We've got a nice exacta 9/5, $2 exacta paid $142.30. The daily double 9 into 9, $203.60. That trifecta I talked about, even if you played the 20-cent variety, 953 paid just shy of $100. As we get our first look at the odds, as mentioning, Chase, 3-5 now on Moira. I think getting to that discussion, I think obviously we had heard originally from the Connections Cotillion, and then maybe the QE2 down at Keeneland, and that's next week. So we were kind of looking at this spot, and there was a lot of talk about, okay, they're going to see who's going to go into this race, and if there's somebody in her they don't like, they're going to try to go down. But I really think the ship is the factor, Don. I look at, and maybe this is reading a lot into it, and obviously Kevin Attard is very open, and you interview him and he'll answer anything. But being there for Queen's Plate, we basically had access to any horse we wanted except for Moira. They did not want distractions. They did not want new environments. They did not really want anything around that horse. So we had Kevin for as long as we wanted to talk to Kevin, but we couldn't get anywhere near entering the barn that Moira was in, let alone near her stall. So, Rafi Hernandez has always described her as energetic when she gets to the front side. And I think there's something to that. And I mentioned this on the Queen's Plate broadcast as well, Don, and I want to get your opinion a little bit more here, but really the size, scale, and scope of Woodbine does also come into play here, because oftentimes the horses, they're just so separated from the track environment with how far away and how big the campus is and how far away the stalls and even the training track are from kind of the main hubbub and where they'll actually see people.
Yeah, it is really it's just an equine therapy grounds, a relaxation clinic, and then you've got the different tracks. There is a dirt training track, you've got the turf training track. You can go on, there's a path kind of with trees around that you can, at the sand ring, there's different places you can go to really stay secluded. And a horse like Moira, that would be advantageous. It would be ideal for one who does get a little bit amped up. Now, we hope there's some maturation. Like, you really hope to see some progression in terms of her mental development. The physical is there. She's just a difficult filly. And as long as she stays just kind of difficult and confident in herself and doesn't flip over the other way and start to be a nervous filly, I think that she will continue to get better. We're going to learn a lot about Moira today, but they're not, this isn't an easy spot that they've chosen for her. It's not even close to being the toughest EP Taylor field that I've seen. Not in a long time, with just one shipper coming from Europe. But you've got sort of the already implanted Euros, the two Chad Brown horses, who we'll touch on right away here. But it's rugged enough. She has to up her game.
Indeed, as we're looking at the odds board right now, 3-5 for Moira, and it's going to be 9-2 on the 8-horse Milady. So Milady, the German import, the one true European shipper that has not ran in the States so far and has actually not ran outside of Germany, is your second choice on the board, about cut in half from the morning line. Let's take a look at that performance I mentioned earlier. This was a second place performance in the German 1000 Guineas on June 12th at Düsseldorf.
Edenmütikara und die Favoritin Jamli noch weit zurück. Vorne aber ist es Nandina, wird attackiert weiterhin von Villefranche. Jetzt aber Schob zwischen den beiden, sehr stark. Schob geht an die Spitze. Schob kann sich mal eine Länge frei machen. Dahinter kommt in die China noch ins Rollen. Außen Milady jetzt stark. Die spüren dabei Schob. Schob und außen Milady mit dem letzten Versuch. Schob vor Milady. Das Rennen geht nach Frankreich. Schob gewinnt vor Milady. Dahinter die China, der Mütikara.
I took a little bit of German in high school. He either wanted to buy a dog or wanted. I'm not sure. Okay, never mind.
I was going to say I've provided the last two shows a race call from Brazil in Portuguese and now a race call in German. But for those of you that didn't pick up on it from the race call, Milady finished second. There was closing from the outside, was the 7-horse in that look back at the 1000 Guineas. And obviously this is a live horse on the board, but I think that does say something, Don, to your point about the field maybe not being the deepest EP Taylor, because I think there's a lot of question marks for Marcus Klug's filly here, 3-year-old filly in this spot. Lasix for the first time, obviously might be a positive for this horse, but I mean, this horse has not won since April of this year, and that was a Group 3 effort in a race that I will not attempt to name. But Grosser Jambon Prix, I don't even want to start there.
That was frightening.
Yeah.
I don't know what language you were just speaking.
I don't
There's some
know.
interesting things as you start to go through. So she's run 7 times. She's won 3. She clicked off 3 wins to start her career and hasn't won since, but she's been really close. She's only run against the fillies 3 times. So she's been entered against the boys on the other 4 occasions, and she's more than held her own. 2 of her wins came against the boys. So I think you'd take something from that. There's the name from her last race. She finished 3rd back. Her most recent race was August the 7th in Dusseldorf. She finished 3rd. We know Toscana Belle because Toscana Belle ran in the Jockey Club, right? Yeah, and she finished 2nd to Chad's K horse. No, McCulloch. She finished 2nd to McCulloch. So she's pretty legitimate. You know, when you look at the one that beat Milady last time, Toscana Belle is really a legitimate horse. So I think that provides some legitimacy. Also, the fact that Stark has come to ride her, I think also adds some credence. Chad Brown will very rarely not have one of his American jockeys come up to Canada. I know that with Keeneland going and with the stake races at Aqueduct, there's a lot going. Belmont at the Big A. There's a lot going on south of the border, but he has 2 local riders. He's never used Kimura before. He has used Luis Contreras before, and he's won a couple. He's like 2 for 6, I think. But I thought that was interesting too, that Chad didn't, really look to, maybe he just couldn't get anybody, so he had to go local. But I think Milady, I'm making a case for Milady. I think she has pretty strong credentials against the field she's facing here.
Milady has one of my squirrel just zone in angles, which is I love international shippers who are applying Lasix for the first time, but there's a sneaky international shipper getting Lasix for the first time, I believe, with Rogier. Can't forget international border. We're all Team North America, 2 different nations though. And also, if I let Rogier and Lamista go off at 10-1 and 35-1, and I don't put 2 to win on each, and either one of those wins, my friends will make fun of me for the rest of my life, more than likely. So I will most definitely be betting the Chad, and definitely the other Chad at 35-1.
Yeah, it's really interesting from a betting board standpoint how many horses are on the float right now. I think the 9 Fev Rover is a horse that you could probably also make a case in this spot, coming off of the win in the Grade 2 Canadian. 6-1 on the morning line, currently getting 17-1. That just ticked down from 19-1 for Mark Cassidy with Patrick Husbands, the only rider that's run this horse in the 2 Woodbine efforts. And this horse has really been all over the globe. This horse has run in England, has run in France, has run in Ireland, and most importantly, has run in Bahrain. But coming off of a nice win at 1 mile and an 1/8 in the Canadian, Fev Rover sitting right on or near the pace. Any chance that we could get this Mark Cassidy horse home?
I like her. Chase, go ahead, because I know you like her. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's one that I had marked down as being a definite contender that can sit close to the pace. I don't know what it transfers to in buyer figures, but I used Briz, and it was a gigantic Briznet figure in the Canadian that you really had to take note of, and it was a huge step forward. The only thing that would concern me is usually anytime you see just that huge leap in performances, you have to kind of worry about the bounce a little bit. But I mean, the horse really hadn't done anything wrong as of late.
I love the ride she got that the day in the Canadian, like Patrick Husbands. He's just so heads up. A long shot cleared, and he was kind of going head and head. And then he looked back to see if anybody else was challenging. This is early in the race. And then he was able to gather her up, let the other horse go and be the speed, get her off of the rail into a perfect position. She really had an ideal trip, so that she definitely had everything in her favor in terms of where she was traveling. So I take that also into a consideration, but I do think she has the ability. I don't think you win because you can win. We don't take away the fact that she was good that day just because she got the right trip. She fits the distance. She's got group experience over in Europe. She ran at some of the nicer tracks, Newmarket, Ascot, the Curragh. They didn't try to shelter her. They really put her in against some pretty tough competition. She more than held her own. So I think Fev Rover is more than legitimate in this field as well.
Looking at, obviously we talked about Moira, but this is the battle of the last 2 Woodbine Oaks winners. Money for Roe, who won the 2021 Woodbine Oaks, is drawn the rail here. and currently 42-1 on the board off of the 20-1 morning line. This is a Kevin Attard horse, just like Moira. So you look at this horse on paper, probably wants a similar trip to what Moira wants. So obviously you can't have both your horses going for the similar trip. Is there a situation here where you could see Money for Row held back in case the speed breaks apart the race potentially with Justin Stein up?
I don't know. She was no good. Like, she wasn't even near Favre over in Flirting Bridge, and she had a pretty good trip too in the Canadian. So I don't really see her being any sort of factor today. I wouldn't bet her at 80-1, let alone 40-1. I probably just got her in the winner's circle.
The only angle that I can find that would maybe make me want to put a little bit of backing behind Money for Row is the fact that the horse has a history of stepping off of turf back onto, the Tapeta surface at Woodbine and winning. Different class of horse though. But that, if I were going to follow a thread, that would be the one. I'm not sure if that's enough of a thread to keep me from plummeting off a cliff or anything.
Well, I'll throw in here that if you look at Timeform US and their pace figures there, 2 straight really slow races where Money for Row, if you look at their numbers, they have it marked as blue. So there was not a lot of pace for Money for Row to run into, which is why you kind of had 2 straight even performances in the Dance Smartly and the Canadian. Whereas you look at some of the successful horses for successful races for Money for Row, really ran into some speed. And I think we're not necessarily looking at an incredibly fast pace today, but we are looking at some horses that would like to be on the front end. I think Fed Rover obviously is one. Adventuring is another one that gets Lasix back on here. I want to take a look at the trip for Adventuring at the end here, which was not much of an adventure in the ladies marathon from Kentucky Downs, which was a grade 3 win last time out for this horse.
And they're into the stretch with a quarter of a mile to run. Adventuring yet to be set down here, joined by Family Way and Luck Money from the inside. Now Adventuring asks for her run. Adventuring with something left in the tank. On the outside, Family Way, Luck Money down toward the rail, but Adventuring's too good. Adventuring and Joel Rosario gonna take them all the way here, winning the AGS Ladies Marathon over Family Way.
Anything you guys take away from that race for Adventuring?
I love betting back horses from Kentucky Downs. Take that away. Yeah. Oof. I feel so conflicted now.
Now you've done it. The squirrel is running loose, everybody. You can see it running around the treadmill and chasing
multiple squirrels. Now there's a beagle chasing them too.
I mean, she got a clear lead. Rosario, she was never challenged. She ran to a big figure. That happens. It's difficult to make a big case for her just if you look through her past performances, because she's run in a lot of listed stakes. She certainly doesn't have the classy sort of past performances as would a Rougier, for example, or even Lamista, who have been contesting grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 company consistently. And I'm not, that's the problem. I'm conflicted by the Chad Brown horses, because you don't want to let Chad beat you, like Chase was saying, at a decent price, but it doesn't look like either of them are in super sharp form right now either. Either of them on their best day, I tend to think Rougier is better than Lamista. So Rougier on her best day could easily handle this field, but I'm not sure that we're seeing Rougier coming into this race ready to put her best day forward.
Now, I think on a numbers perspective, sorry, Chase, on a numbers perspective, obviously Rozier makes sense if you go back to the first start of the year and the first start on the East Coast for this horse, which was the Boguet at Belmont on May 14th. I want to just sneak that in real quick.
Now Rougier, and she makes her move on the outside, getting closer. Lamista at the rail and Runaway Rumor. Off the turn and into the stretch. It's High Opinion, Our Flash Drive. Plum Alley continues to battle on. Rougier is out in the middle of the course and coming on now. Here comes Rougier up to challenge Our Flash Drive. Here is Rougier now to take over the lead. It is Rougier, and she will deliver here, coming from off the pace under Flavien Prat.
from a numbers perspective, one thing you'll see if you're handicapping and you're somebody that's looking at like the power picks or those sort of things that are put out by Trackmaster, that are put out by Equine Edge, that are put out by Timeform US, one thing you will not see is the name Moira on any of those as a top 3 selection in this race at 4 to 5. Obviously, this is a big jump in class. So you look at the figures, and from a figures perspective, getting Rozier at 6 to 1 here, if we get the best of Rozier like we saw in that race, I mean, that's value with Chad Brown.
Yeah, she looks good today too. So she gets Lasix, which I really wonder, if that's going to make. Obviously, she hasn't been able to run with it because running in the States is different. The rules are different. The graded stakes here in Canada, you can still use Lasix. So she will get it for the first time. Her first race off of the boat was really good. And since then, she's kind of struggled a bit. So maybe that is going to be the difference maker. She's just too nice of a filly. Some of her runs in France were tremendous. She's got over $700,000 made. So she's obviously not a slouch by any way, shape, or form. So Rozier could be the sneaky price on the board right now and being a little bit neglected when maybe she shouldn't be.
I did get a look at Milady on the track, the 8 horse currently at 5 to 1. And from a build perspective, what she reminds me of is Sir for Sure. She looks like she could be 100 hands tall, and there's just not a lot underneath her at this point. 3-year-old filly, obviously don't know how she's quarantined. Don't know if that's, she didn't seem that thin when we looked at that backtrack, but that was a while ago, a few months ago when we looked at the German 1000 Guineas. She looks pretty thin out there. Doesn't necessarily mean that she's not normally that way, but obviously when we've got a European shipper, the quarantine bar and the feed is different than they're used to. All of these things are definitely a factor.
Yeah, I thought she looked good. Chase, what do you think? Are you going with the shipper? Chase is still the hamsters or how?
Yeah, when I do these and when I do any, handicapping where I'm picking up, maybe a little bit later in the card, I haven't watched all the races. I try to at least go back and see how the races on the surface have been run. And this is what I've noticed. I think of maiden special weight, maiden claiming races as typically being won on the front end. Well, on the turf, they've been won by horses getting, pocket trips from off the pace. Horses facing other winners, kind of winning from pocket trips from off the pace. And so I think, with this race, which is really just a head scratcher for me because there's so many unknowns, maybe I try to focus in on that sort of angle. That might have pushed me towards Fev Rover. It might also kind of push me towards Henrietta Topham, who kind of could sit that same sort of trip. Might not be fast enough, but if the bias is strong enough to pull a horse that has that sort of run style into first, worth considering, worth a $1 win bet at least.
Not a horse we've mentioned so far, and you get Emma Wilson. She just won her last stake race. That's always a good angle. She's definitely flying under the radar. You get kind of low profile connections. A trainer, Mulcahy, who wins a lot just at tracks like Indiana. So, he's not the first one that you think of when you look at this race. Flirting Bridge, I found a little interesting. We haven't mentioned her, a daughter of Camelot. So she's another Euro who's been transplanted. And her 3 races haven't been horrible. She just about won the Canadian. She was close. She was moving well at the end. I thought she did by far her best running in the last 250 yards of that race, whereas before it just looked like she was finding herself. And I think maybe having that experience on the course itself at Woodbine on the EP Taylor turf course might help her too. And she might be a lot better today. There's a lot of different ways that you could go in this race. One of them to me is not Moira. I like Moira. She's a great story, but at 6 to 5, I just think she has to improve so much. The odds just aren't worth. Can she win? Of course. She's a nice horse, but at 6 to 5, she would win without me.
I'm going to go with that similar sentiment here. I do think I do think that I'm going to use Moira underneath in a trifecta, maybe in that 3rd spot. As a horse that can pick up the pieces and can look impressive down the front stretch, I should say, coming for home. But I am on the 9 here. I think really we're getting just incredible odds on Fev Rover. Hasn't done anything wrong in the 2 attempts here at Woodbine. A second to Wakanaka and then obviously the win in the Canadian last time out. I think that there's a chance that this horse could wire this field, and I think will definitely be in the mix coming down the lane. So I'm going with Fev Rover. Chase, where are you?
I think the wisest bet here is just to bet that all the horses are going to have a good time. This is just like a white knuckle kind of, I don't know what to do. But this is something I rarely do in the States because I try to beat the man often. But I'm other chatting here, and I'm going to use La Mista. I think La Mista sits the pocket trip. And, people have been other chatted before. They will be other chatted again many, many times. I hope this is one of those.
Racing has its own vernacular. We should just make a racing dictionary, because there's, the other chat, and we're all like, yeah, that's happened to me. We all know exactly what you're talking about. That's my filly right there. I think she looks splendid. I think she's got a beautiful long build to her. I love the way that she's engaged with what's happening. She's never really shown signs of nervousness, and yet she looks like she's ready to run. You've got a rider that's shipped over who's very familiar with her running style. So Milady for me, and I will take what do we call it? The first Chad? I'll take the Chad. There's the Chad and the other Chad. I'll take the Chad Rougier in my exacta play here. So
the primary
for me,
Chad.
the German, the primary Chad. Yes.
And to make things very complicated, I'm going to give a trifecta key box out. And for those that aren't familiar with the trifecta key box, essentially, I'm going to put one of these horses in first, second, and third, and then do all of the combinations with the other horses that I'm boxing around this horse. So with the 20-cent base wager, this is actually a $12 wager for the trifecta here. I'm trifecta key box with 9 being the key, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8. So 9 Fev Rover with Adventuring, Moira, Rogier, Flirting Bridge, and Milady.
Nice. I'm going to play an exacta box that if I hit might be enough to just buy a sweet dirt bike for myself or something. So I'm going to use La Mista. I'm also going to use Henrietta Topham, and I'm going to use Fev Rover all in a exacta box, and just kind of hope for a sweet Kawasaki after this is done.
Ice cold. I'm going 9 on top of the primary Chad. 9 on top of 4.
Oh,
that's all I'm doing.
You're going 8 on top of 4, right?
Oh, sorry, 8 on top of 4. Yes, that would have been. Now if the 9 wins, I'm sad because that's 10. I saw the 10-1. I got attracted to it. Thank you. 8 on top of 4.
It's all right. I'll share some of my win money on the 9 if the 9 comes forward. And unlike the Durham Cup, I know what went wrong. Although, okay, just making sure that wasn't us. We will have the call from Robert Geller. And we'll go with the rest of the load and the call, and we'll be back, and we'll see who wins. Moira, this would be a great story if she wins. We don't think it's going to happen, but let's find out.
Anchoress, Milady. Work Milady closer to the start. She goes, and if there's a barn that's been on fire today, it's definitely that of Mark Cassie. With 4 wins on the program, sends out Fev Rover at Gate. They're all in, locked up. Away in racing in the EP Taylor Stakes, and as they go, boring out a bit was Milady, and Fev Rover back to the tail and coming for the early lead. Racing up on the outside is going to be La Mista with Adventuring the Rail, and coming around them is Milady. Moira's handy on the inside, and Flirting Bridge is also not far off the pace. As they settle, Fev Rover's 3 wide. A length away on the inside is Rougier. And back towards the tail, Henrietta Topham, and last is Money for Row. Racing with the early advantage, Adventuring. Got out to lead by a length, Milady second. On the inside, La Mista. A length away, 4th, Flirting Bridge. And Fev Rover the outside, followed by Moira, who's got back to be about 6th on the rail and is about 4.5 off the lead. In behind them came Rougier, Henrietta Topham second last, and last is Money for Row. About 8 lengths covers this entire field, and showing the way in the EP Taylor Stakes, Adventuring. A length and a half, Milady, 3rd placing La Mista. A neck to Flirting Bridge, 3/4 Fev Rover having a wide trip. Moira engaging up on the inside behind them, and on the outer goes Rougier. 2 lengths away, Henrietta Topham, and last is Money for Row. There's been little shift to position, and as they reach the far turn, it's Adventuring in front. A length, Milady. Going forward is Flirting Bridge. Rougier dropped out very sharply there, is virtually back to second last now. Coming forward on the inside again, La Mista, and Moira's nudging up in the center of Fev Rover the outside. A break to Rougier, who lost ground. Then Henrietta Topham, long last, Money for Row. Milady's coming after Adventuring, and 3 wide Flirting Bridge. Moira started to edge up in the center as they corner, though. Fev over the outside ahead of Moira, and over on the inside, Lamista. They race into the stretch in the EP Taylor, and out in front, Adventuring, Milady, Flirting Bridge coming at them. Moira coming for the run up on the inside, and down the outer, Fev Rover. Out in front, Adventuring, Flirting Bridge, Milady. Moira trying to get a run, and down the outside is Fev Rover. Flirting Bridge has gone to the front. Flirting Bridge in front, and Rugier finishing behind Fev Rover. Rugier flying down the outside. Moira up the rails as they go to the wire. Rugier on the outside. Rugier has won. Moira second, then came in the center. Flirting Bridge from Fev Rover and Adventuring. 2:2:62 is the final time.
Well, that was quite the start, and what ended up being quite the race there, as Lamista made a New York traffic style right turn out of the gate and made things interesting for both the 8 and the 9. And then what a performance for Rogier down the lane.
Moira ran huge. I mean, she surprised me today. She got a great trip. She saved all the ground. She came out the inside, but she surprised me. I really didn't think she would be top 3. So kudos to her. I don't know what happened to Rogier. Like, she was in it, and then she completely, as we see Lamista completely take the 8 and the 9 out to the outside, just saying a welcome to North America to Milady. We don't speak German around here, so here, take some of that. But I'd be interested to see what happened with Rogier. I mean, there's obviously no sense to call an inquiry because she won, unless if she did something, but I don't think so. But I can't believe she came back and won off of that.
No, it was very, very impressive, Chase.
Yeah, I didn't think that the horse had a shot just based off of Robert Geller's voice with, you know, what happened with the trouble in that trip. And man, I'll tell you what, whenever the hole opened up on the inside and they kind of darted Moira to the inside, I was like, well, here we go. It happens. It's about to. But I have also learned just to never question Dawn Lupul ever again. If she could just be my life coach from now on, I would appreciate it.
Look at this head on, because you're gonna like Moira is actually needing room. She kind of she did basically bounce off the rail, and then finally the 2 horse got out of her way and she was able to come through. But she actually had a troubled trip. She may have won this race. You know, if that hadn't happened, she really did put in a nice effort.
She also fouled the 7, and that's the inquiry that we see on the board now.
That's Chad on Chad crime.
And
Chad on Chad.
It's not Chad on, it's Kevin Natard on.
Oh, I'm
Chad sorry. But yeah, so I think the 7 was fading, obviously, after setting the pace, which we'll have to figure out what the number is. They still have the 26 and 3 on the board. I don't believe they went that slow. But Moira inquiry here. This is interesting for me because if they kick Moira out of the top 3, then I will hit the trifecta key box that I gave out here. Ooh. And I think that's our only real shot of
that's kind of it's pretty ugly. I would say that's definitely something they're going to look at. I don't do stewards calls because I'm usually wrong. But that looks significant. She almost dropped that other horse. So
Louis Contreras is not one to act in these scenarios generally. It took a few strides to get that horse going again here. So we'll be interested to see here as we wait out the inquiry alongside the rest of you. We, as usual, have a lot of comments that are not in English. So unfortunately, I do not know what you're saying. But we did have some people from Germany.
Hi from Germany. Hi.
Check in. And our friends from the Real Players Inside the Backstretch also gave us a shout. Moira here, we're going to be waiting a bit for this to go official, and we'll see if Rafi and Moira are taken down here. But again, regardless, it was a great effort from Moira, and I think Rogier had trouble. Moira had trouble after the trouble that she caused there. She also, she cut the 7 off to get to the rail, and I don't think there was much room at the rail at the end of the day. So we'll see. But Rogier going into the winner's circle for the connections. And this is a first time Chad Brown calls Kazushi Kimura, and that's a win.
Yep.
So obviously Woodbine's leading rider, and our favorite accidental swearer, Kazushi Kimura, gets the big win here in another grade 1.
Isn't he cute? Remember that interview I did with them, and I asked him if they had taught him all the swear words, and he said yes. And then sure enough, he decided to use one just to prove that he did indeed know them all.
I now feel robbed after seeing the head-on, because before I just thought Lamista ran an okay race, but now I believe undeniably that Lamista would have won the race going away, and I will produce sign
Open links
from other people who agree with me.
Okay, we'll support you on that.
One of the things that's tough for a European jockey in that situation with Milady is obviously races are run a little differently in terms of speed and like getting a position early versus in Europe, and especially in Germany. I mean, they basically jog out of the gate. So obviously we saw Milady get rushed up front. I think that was a tough position for, I don't, obviously a very, very talented jockey in Stark, but I don't want to second guess that. But that might have been better if there was a jockey with some more North American experience on Milady, given the start that was forced there by Lamista.
Yeah, and if you ever look like the Woodbine, so the EP Taylor Turf course, it's 1.5 miles in circumference, but it's not like an oval at all. Where they start there at that 1.25 miles, they're starting here and they basically go up, and then it's a hairpin turn. She was 3 wide around the worst part where you don't want to be wide. She got hit at the start. Whether that excited her and made her get more into the race, I don't know, but she was wide at the worst possible point of that turn. And I think that and then engaging with the speed. So I really think that she didn't get an ideal trip at all.
Rogier, Chad Brown, Peter Brandt, and Michael Tabor, the ownership group here with Kazushi Kimura aboard. Again, we are waiting out the inquiry, which does not involve the winner, Rogier. Involves
Does that push her to 1 million? I think that pushes her to 1 million, doesn't it? I don't do math.
With that pushes her well over 1 million, about 1.1 million for Rogier.
Cheers to Rogier, the millionaires. Nice.
I just hope that when I'm Peter Brandt's age that I dress as well as Peter Brandt. That dude is always just killing it, man.
Long wait for the stewards here. The most popular horse in Canada at the moment, Moira, might get taken down here from second. I think based on everything we've seen, we've only really seen the head-on. We haven't seen a pan of that situation at all. We've just seen the head-on. But it does not look good for Moira. Fouling the 7, who was fading out of it. I don't know how strongly the 7 was going to finish. Chase,
luring them into a sense of false security is what it is. Clearly, Moira is guilty of targeting and should be ejected for the first half of the next game.
Nice. Well done. It looks cold. It really looks cold in Toronto. That's unfortunate. I'm not there, but it does look cold. The stewards will, of course, take a fair bit of time. This is a pretty significant race. That would be a graded stakes placing for Moira. So consequences far down the line in terms of broodmare value. It's a lot of money to get disqualified from second place and placed far back. So I really believe, of course, the only sport in the world where they need to talk to the guilty parties as opposed to just looking at the tape and making a decision. It is what it is. Horse racing has its quirks. It's like, did you foul him? No. And you talk to the guy that's fouled. Did you get fouled? Yes. And that's basically what they say. And most of the time it's in Spanish and you can't understand.
I start playing in my head by if this were in this jurisdiction, would the horse get taken down? If this horse was in that jurisdiction, would the horse get taken down?
It shouldn't be that way, right? I mean, it's very difficult. And a lot of it is subjective, but there should be some consistency in terms, like an inquiry like this. Like you should be able to call the same thing in New York, in Gulfstream, in California, in Canada. It should be either is or isn't. These ones shouldn't be debatable.
Yeah, I could go ahead and say the NYRA stewards have ruled there will be no change.
You're probably right.
All right.
What do you think, JD?
Are you change?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that is so unfortunate, but
did you have that trifecta at the 20-cent base?
We had it at the 20-cent base that we gave out on the air, so we'll see what it pays. Again, we invested $12, which is a lot, but we faded the favorite at the end of the day out of that trifecta, so we'll see. as Jeff Bratt reaches Kazushi Kimura, and hopefully KK does not swear this time. I don't think he will, but we'll take that off and we'll bring it back for the pari-mutuel payouts. Curious, where you guys could see some of these horses going. What's next for Moira after what will end up being on paper about a 7th place performance?
I have no idea. Like, I haven't been able to really gauge because we don't know the motivation. Are they trying, if you're trying to avoid shipping, then that really limits what you can do. She obviously has a lot of dances that she could participate in locally in Ontario, but I don't know where you go. I don't know, honestly.
I mean, I would like to see Moira get another crack at the turf, because the turn of foot that she showed, even with some serious bumping by the rail, she really turned it on late. And that's, looks like a classic turf horse. But at the same time, how much longer are we going to have turf racing available in Canada? If we're nervous shipping, kind of takes snowbirding down to Gulfstream out of the question. And it's really interesting. In my expert analysis, say, I don't know. I have no clue.
Well, unless if you ship and leave her, right? You ship her and you stay. Yeah.
True.
You ship her and leave her at Gulfstream, and you've got turf and Tapeta maybe is something you do. But I think one thing we can almost certainly say here, Rozier headed back to the Breeders' Cup Filly Mare Turf for the 2nd straight year after that performance. 7th place effort last year, obviously Loves Only You with the big effort from Japan. And we take a look at our pari-mutuel. So, okay, we invested $12 and we got back $55.93, but a win is a win.
It's a profit. Nothing wrong with that. You had to get a disqualification, but it all worked out.
It all spins.
And we're also looking at potential pick 6 jackpot payout, only 55 cents live. We'll obviously, you can follow along with Woodbine and see what goes on in the next race here. But this is the end of our Woodbine Live series for the year. Don and Chase have been there every step of the way. Appreciate it, guys. Anything you'd like to plug, Don?
No, nothing really. It's been fun. It shows you the quality of the Woodbine racing. It's competitive. We just saw again there Chad Brown horse finishing first and paying $12.60. There's nothing wrong with that. That exacta I think is more than fair at $103. So the racing in Woodbine has always been extremely good, competitive, and you can make a lot of money pari-mutually. So kudos to Woodbine and the product.
Chase, anything you'd like to plug?
Sure. Yeah. Check out my horse racing podcast for the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, the Notorious OTB. Need to get Dawn on there. And then, that's pretty much, I'm around. You can just, pop your head out and say, I'll respond. And also this is the first time that I've spent as much attention on Woodbine this year. And I got to say, it's a great track to learn to play. It's got some great idiosyncrasies, different trainers and everything. It was just a blast playing Woodbine.
All right. Appreciate everybody joining us all year long on our Woodbine Live series, the road to the plate, and then through the Queen's Plate, and through today with the EP Taylor Stakes. And we'll see you again next year on America's Best Racing and Woodbine. For now, enjoy the rest of your gambling day, and we'll see you guys soon.